Hello. Welcome to Reddit Recapped. We will be going over the most interesting submissions from our /AskReddit. What is your creepiest true story? If you want to see more content like this, please like and subscribe as it greatly helps me out. Let's get into it. Posted this before, many years back. Posting again as it was genuinely terrifying and absolutely true. Many years ago, I lived in a big, old, 3-story house that had a room on the middle level that we converted into an office. I used to write financial reports late at night that were published early the next morning. The office had a few computers and my toddler son had been playing on one of them for most of the evening, right up until I finished my work at around 9 p.m. By then he had fallen asleep, so I switched off his monitor, scooped him up and took him to bed, flicking off the light as I left. For the next couple of hours I relaxed in another room watching TV with my wife. She went to bed around 11 p.m., and at midnight I decided to do the same. I realized I'd left a window open in the office, so I went in there to close it. The house was silent, and the room was pitch black dark and ice cold when I walked in. Colder than it should have been for the time of the year, even with the window open. I paused for a moment in the center of the room to think about this, and then it happened. Knock knock knock. Something was tapping on the glass. But it wasn't the random tappings of a bird or another kind of animal, it was completely uniform. It sounded human, but I was on the second floor. So how was that possible? It was so dark that I couldn't make anything out against the black glass, but a few moments later it happened again. Knock knock knock. By now I was already feeling on edge. Then, something happened that chilled me to the core. Because out of the corner of the room, to my right, and from the darkness, a high-pitched, almost squeaky voice began to speak quite loudly. "I can see you." I froze on the spot. My blood went cold. My bowels prepared for evacuation. My God, I thought, I never wrote that book. Any book. It spoke again, but with greater emphasis on that all-important word. "I can see you." I determined that I was almost certainly fucked, so I figured, what the hell? I turned slowly to my right and walked into the darkness, until I finally reached my son's computer. Nothing there but an empty chair. But no talking now. Just silence. A horrible silence. Carefully, I reached over and switched on the monitor. The screen brightened, and there it was, something red, and horrible. Once again it tapped on the glass. It was fucking Elmo from my kid's Sesame Street game. When I was in high school I had a huge crush on a guy a couple years older than me. He was on the boys' basketball team and I was on the girls' team. I would always try to get him to play basketball with me at our town's outdoor basketball court. He usually declined. One night in the middle of winter he asked if I wanted to come play one-on-one with him. I thought it was weird he wanted to play basketball in the middle of night in winter, so I had my friend come with. She got bored quickly and he was being really flirty with me, so I agreed she could leave. He assured her he would drive me back to her house. I was spending the night there. About 30 minutes later I'm feasing and ask him to drive me back. We get in his car and he tells me he has to warm the car up before we can go. He's on his phone for about 10 minutes and we are sitting there in silence. Out of nowhere he starts telling me about his sexual fetishes and how he gets off on physically causing other people pain. He said that no one really knows the real him and if they did it would scare the living shit out of most people. I'm starting to get uncomfortable at this point and ask if we can leave. He pulls out of the parking lot and starts driving the opposite direction of my friend's house. We lived in a small town and he drives about 5 miles out of town and turns on a gravel road. He tells me he's going to take me to meet some people he thinks would really like me. He then tells me I seem like the type of girl who would like being submissive to a bunch of men, and he wouldn't even have to make me beg for it. So I'm getting really freaked out and scared at this point. I'm looking for my cell phone and remembered I had left it at my friend's house to charge. I start asking him questions to distract him. I'm finally able to get my hands on his phone when he stops at the shack in the middle of nowhere. He isn't aware that I have his phone at this point and tells me to get out of the car because his friends are waiting inside and we don't want to make them mad. I dial 911 and tell him if he doesn't take me back to my friends I'm calling the police right then. He looks really shocked and then starts laughing hysterically. He tried to convince me this was all a big joke and he wanted to see how I would react. I held his phone with 911 ready to go the entire ride back to my friends. Once he pulled in the driveway and I got out of the car he rolled down his window and said I would really appreciate it if you never tell anybody about this, and peeled out. I was 15 years old and should have called the cops, but I was young and dumb. The year is 2002. It's late at night and I'm driving to my parents' house that's some way outside the city, basically in the middle of nowhere. A truck cuts me off at an intersection on my way to the highway. I had right of way and would have plowed straight into the truck if I hadn't slammed on the brakes. I honk the horn at him and give him the middle finger, which I doubt he sees, and pass him as we get on the highway. A little while later I turn off the highway and notice that the same truck turns the same way. The roads are smaller and it's dark, so I'm driving at the speed limit and the truck catches up to me. He's getting uncomfortably close, and even though I start speeding up, he just gets closer and closer. When the truck is like 3 feet from my rear bumper, I accelerate as fast as I can and get a couple of 100 yards between us so I can quickly turn at the next intersection. He follows. I hit the accelerator and turn again when the next intersection comes along. So I'm racing down these country roads that are barely wide enough for the truck, and this asshole is keeping up. My heart is beating like crazy. But I also know the area and the roads, and as we get into roads that run through the woods, I turn off my headlights, drive like a maniac, and manage to turn to an even smaller road without him possibly seeing me take the turn. I can't keep driving because I know the road just goes to a cabin and ends there, so I come to a stop a bit down the road and to the side, so the trees will cover me, and turn off my engine. Then I wait. After a while I can see his headlights on the road I turned off from. He's driving slower now. He stops at the intersection and shines a flashlight down the road to where I am. He's looking at my direction for what feels like minutes, and I hope the flashlight can't reach all the way to where my car is. Finally he drives away. I wait for 5 more minutes and then head back to the main road and continue to my parents' house. I was working in a convenience store, 19 years old, single mom. Luckily this day I wasn't alone. This guy came in, walked around and then went back to pump his gas. Then drove off without paying. I got the tag number, called the police per policy, and didn't expect anything to come from it because that's what always happened. Gas theft just wasn't a priority to the police department. To my surprise, less than an hour later, an officer walks in and asks me to identify the guy, which I did. I really didn't think too much of it, just happy they caught the asshole. I went on about my business, went home, got on with life. The next day the manager calls me early, tells me that she saw the guy who I had identified on the news. He was wanted for 2 counts of murder. He had murdered a female jogger, no apparent motive, and a convenience store clerk that he had kidnapped after robbing her. I assumed she was mistaken because that just seemed too crazy. Something I did helping catch a murderer just seemed unlikely. Later that day the officer came by and told me it was true and thanked me. Without the tag number they may not have caught him until he had hurt me women. She also told me that the reason that the police caught him quickly was the car was stolen. Then the officer told me the scariest part of all. Coming in and walking around the store is exactly the same thing he did before the robbery/kidnapping of the second woman he murdered. I will never know exactly why he didn't rob me, or worse, I assume it was because my manager was there, which was unusual. I'm just grateful for whatever it was. This was early 2003 or so, and I'm in a small southern city, so it's doubtful it'll still be online, but I will check. So this actually happened pretty recently, and I hope I can properly do this story justice. This happened the weekend before Christmas. So a few details to set up the scene. When you walk down the stairs of my house you can see the front door at about the last 2 steps. Also, my roommate's dog claws at the blind so anybody can see in through the bottom of the window. Anyways, me and my buddy are up in my room because I keep my good beer in my mini fridge because I can't trust anybody. On our way down the stairs we're just having normal, casual conversation about work or some shit. Then we get to the point where we can see the front door, and there is this creature crouched down smiling in with their face pressed to the window and staring through our souls with black eyes. I completely freeze and my friend says, "What the fuck is that?" My first thought is that someone we know was knocking on the door, but we didn't hear it being upstairs. After about 1 second of me focusing in I realize that is absolutely not the case. My friend yells this time, "What the fuck is that?" And he bolts back upstairs leaving me to face this thing on my own. I see that this creature is a female, and it scared the shit out of me because I expected her to be as scared as us and try to run away, but she was smiling, showing about 2 teeth, and seemed overly pleased to see me, which gave me the total creeps. I didn't know if my door was locked, I didn't know if she was going to try to come in and do witchcraft on us, I didn't even really know how to move anymore. I just tried to evaluate what my move should be because I was sure back upstairs was not the correct choice. And then she started to speak, but I couldn't understand what the hell she was saying through the glass. Then she pointed in my house, and that's when I realized she was pointing at my Christmas lights. See, I host a huge Christmas party every year and go all out in decorations, and this year we turned a refrigerator into an 8-foot snowman. This is what she was coming to see. Once I realized this I started laughing quite uncontrollably, still scared and confused because she just kept staring at me. My friend came down and we moved out of her sight. I let the dogs in so they'd bark at her and maybe she'd leave. They did bark and we stayed out of view, but she started jiggling the door handle, turned out it was locked, trying to get in. I looked at my buddy like, what in the actual hell is she thinking? So I run over there and push the dogs back and decide to take the plunge and go outside. It was a 4 feet 6 inches homeless woman who truly looked like a troll. Literally 2 teeth and very dark eyes, but she turned out to be nice. I decided to chit-chat with her for a few and then tell her we were leaving. This strategy was a success. The worst part is that we told a bunch of friends that night, and I've had 3 people crouching down in that scary-ass position staring at me when I've come downstairs. I can't trust anybody. I live in a small town in the middle of nowhere. The next nearest neighborhood is over 4 miles away. One night a few years ago we got over 1.5 feet of snow overnight. So far from main roads and on the weekend I knew our roads will be remain plowed for quite some time. I went to my out back deck door to admire the snow-draped trees and the still heavily falling flurries when I noticed footprints leading to my door, then turning around and leaving. I looked and saw that they came from my neighbor's side and thought that one of their more delinquent kids played a joke as my sledding tube on the railing was popped. I decided I'd wait till later as it was early to call their parents. I went on Facebook and after scrolling for a bit I noticed one of my neighbors closer to the entrance posted, "Did someone knock for me or something at my back door?" I immediately called her and told her I have an idea. I called the first house on the entrance and told him what was going on. He went and checked and sure enough they were there too. Everyone started calling everyone else. I called the family at the far end and they told me there was none there. Then I got a call from my next door neighbor. She called the woman that lives next to the end house. She said that there were footprints that led to her door. But none led away. We already called the police by this point, but now we called them back and said that it's an emergency now. They told us the roads are still all unplowed and they can't send a plow truck to clear the way as they are a privately owned company. The woman was losing it, so one of the husbands, huge bear of a man, across the road from her texted her to say he was coming over to invite her over. He came and she left. We put up one guy's live feed motion recording hunting cameras facing all exits. Nothing came out. Around 7 p.m. a plow truck came as well as 3 cop cars. The couple she was staying with and her went to her house and stood in the doorway as the police searched. They found nothing. She begged them to keep looking, so they did. 2 of the cops went into the basement again. This time only one came up. He took her to the side room and we could hear hysterical crying. By now we are all out there. Me and a few of the other guys started towards the door when several police confronted us. They told us they found someone hiding under a cover opening in the stairwell that she didn't even know existed. A few minutes later a scruffy man screaming and kicking came out in cuffs and was led away. He turned out to be a thrill-seeking junkie who was on probation for assault against a family member. The cops told us that they feel like he didn't want to stay at his apartment after a fight with his roommate and drove off in his roommate's car from the county over and got stuck in our unplowed roads. We all were called as witnesses in the case. My younger brother and I have absolutely horrible sleep schedules. Insomnia, night terrors and various other sleep disorders run in my family. Sometimes when we're spending time together and find ourselves in the wee hours and unable to sleep, we'll go for walks, but only when it's at least starting to get bright outside. One late spring morning we left the house with my dog at about 4:30. We were walking through the ghostly twilight between dawn and sunrise. We live in a semi-rural area, so we were very much alone. We were making our way along a minor road and intended to cross into a smaller trail which ran perpendicular to the one we were on. When we reached the entrance of the trail we began to cross the road towards it, in such a way that in the growing light we could see directly down it for about 100 meters. As we did, something came running out of the darkness towards us. We both froze in place. You know that sense of pure fear and confusion when you simply can't begin to process what you're seeing? The thing about 3 feet tall and appeared flesh-colored. It was very thin and ran on 2 long spindly legs. Its head was long and narrow. It resembled a shriveled little human with no arms. It was running at maybe 15 miles an hour and directly for us. As it reached the entrance of the trail it abruptly turned to its right to run along the road. Only when we saw it in profile did we register what it was. A fawn-colored greyhound. It must have escaped from wherever it lived overnight. Because it had been running straight at us and it was so slim, its back end hadn't been visible at all. We could only see something vaguely human-shaped until it turned. If you can, try to visualize just the front legs of this guy running through the half-light towards you. We were still in shock and didn't think to call for it, though even if we had, I doubt it would have stopped. We kept an eye out for wanted posters but never found any, which makes me hope the dog and its owner were reunited before they needed to be put up. Hopefully the dog was secured enough afterwards to prevent any future early morning heart attacks. If you have liked this video, please leave us a like and maybe a subscribe. Catch you on the next video.